Hi, and welcome to Filmmakers Compass Podcast, a show where we talk about movies and, well, more movies. I'm D-Man, joined by CP. And CP, I think I should have reversed that. You're CP, and you're being joined by D-Man from Ohio. As I mentioned on the last podcast episode, I am uh, out of state.
Out of state in the beautiful Buckeye State, might we add? Said
Yeah,
no one
Cleveland,
ever.
Ohio. Yeah, I haven't actually hit the town or anything. I am just hanging out in my hotel room talking movies, which is one of my all-time favorite things to do. So even though, CP, I
Yes,
am halfway around the country, I always look forward to our discussions, and especially today, because we have a lot to talk about. But
we definitely do.
bef yeah, before we jump into all that, we also have quite a few shout outs. So I want to get these out of the way at the top of the episode because there has been some great conversation and I love it. I love to see it. So thank you guys for continuing the conversations from the show. Fantastic. That's really just a huge shout out to Drucker. You nailed it, man. So first up, CP, just want to wish all the fathers out there a happy Father's Day. Happy belated Father's Day. It was on Sunday, and hopefully everyone had fun. I got to spend the time with Michael, my father-in-law. So happy Father's Day. And then I played phone tag with my dad. I did not actually talk to him on Father's Day
Oh,
because
bummer.
I was at my sister's house and it was a pool day. So I didn't have my phone on me. So I did talk to him, however. So love you, Dad. And hope you had a good one. I don't know. Did you do anything fun for Father's Day, CP?
Um, yeah, just actually, I convinced my dad to watch the Guy Ritchie movie, The Covenant, because it's an
Nice.
awesome movie, and did some barbecuing. So, what more do you want to do on Father's Day?
Win, win. Yeah. And on that note, just happy Juneteenth as well. I saw, we did throw a post up on social media, so hope everybody enjoyed that holiday. I know I actually did get that day off as a national holiday now from work,
Yay!
and I spent it traveling to Ohio. So
Not
I hope
yay.
I hope the rest of you had maybe a little bit more fun than I did. So, CP, you and I got to go to the movies together this week.
Oh,
We
we
actually
did. We
we
did. And
did
that
go see.
just so everybody knows, D Man and I have actually not been to the movies together since before the pandemic.
Yeah, it's been a while. I mean, we hang out all the time and we often put movies on when we're at like my place or somewhere else, but going to the theater together, it's been a little while. So
Yeah. And it
it was
used to be a
fun.
regular thing. We used to go once a week to the movies.
Yeah. Well, and we did go see The Flash, which we're going to be talking about in this episode.
Oh, yeah,
So
we will. Lots to say.
I know Ivor and then my coworker actually right now here in Ohio, both said they are going to see The Flash, and my coworker Farron actually is there right now. She went tonight to go see The Flash, so I cannot wait to talk to her about this. And who knows, maybe I'll let her know to check out the show. But Ivor, I hope you had a chance to see The Flash and you're ready for this discussion because we definitely do have some thoughts. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope everybody always has a good time at the movies. CP, I want to throw this out here. It's not really a shout out so much as it is, my friend Anthony.
Oh, I know your friend
I had
Anthony.
to, I wanted to bring this up in the shout outs. It's not really a topic. I just wanted your opinion on it. Before he goes to see movies, particularly comic book movies, he actually watches a lot of shows on YouTube, very similar to this podcast. And
Nice.
I think, I don't know, I feel like though he watched those shows and they ruined the Flash for him. So
Well,
now I don't think he wants to go.
knowing him, I would have thought that he would have gone to see The Flash regardless of the reviews,
Me too.
because that just seems right up his alley. So I'm a
He
little
loves
disappointed that he
DC.
didn't go.
Yeah, I told him I was like, I think you should see it. I know he actually really does love the Snyderverse. I mean, he hates some of my takes on this show.
Oh, well,
He
then
he
sounds like he's
sides with
got
you.
smart guy. Smart guy.
Yeah. But Anthony, I'm just, throwing this out in the shout outs, man. Maybe definitely, give the Flash a shot and just go check it out. I mean, if anything, you'll just have a good day at the movies. So next up, got to give a shout out to Drucker. Like I mentioned at the top, I am going to get into some of his comments here in CP. He has plenty to say, but also Drucker, have to give you a big congratulations. His Denver Nuggets won the NBA title.
I mean, I don't think I'm
So
going to clap for that, but way to go. I'm glad, Drucker.
was quite a run. Jokic had a postseason for the ages, cemented himself as one of the best players, in the NBA. Even though I think they had by seeding, technically, a fairly easy path to the title. Two eight seeds, a seven, and a five, or something like that, or a four. But still, he looked the part. And if you're supposed to dominate eight seeds, he got it done. So he played them, what, nine times and lost once
Yep.
to the two eight seeds. So yeah, they killed it. But while we're talking about Drucker, he did get in on some thoughts here, which was fantastic. So let me pull those up really quick because he's going backwards here. So Drucker actually jumps in and he says, at Film Comp Podcast, just listen to the new VR goggles from Apple. It's so stupid. Basically, got to pay a mortgage to buy them. Who are they trying to market it to? It's such a waste of money. So stupid. It won't replace me going to the theaters with my friends. So stupid.
Wow.
So
Apparently, he thinks Apple's so stupid, is what I'm getting from that.
yeah, I mean, I think you and I talk CP, and one of the things that they're just going to have trouble with is the very nature of people putting goggles on their face. I mean, not only, like Drucker said, does that look so stupid, but it's just very isolating. You know, it's not like it's an experience that, like, if you and I were both in the same living room, we would both put on goggles and then pretend that we're in this virtual world together. Like, we're there together. So it just, as far as movies go, I think Apple, you might create kind of a singular experience, an isolating experience for people if they are alone, right? Like maybe if I was here in this hotel room in Ohio and I had the goggles, I could, enjoy a 4K movie. But I don't know. I think with the shared experience thing, they just run the risk of the goggles potentially becoming gimmicky. And that's
No,
very un-Apple like.
yeah.
So it's risky. I don't know. We'll see how they do with movies. I think that they have potential for other things, but movies is tough. Now, at Sean Cake actually jumps in here and says, might actually be the first Apple product I'm interested in buying, which threw me for a loop. Sean
Wow.
coming in hot.
I didn't think he'd ever buy an Apple product ever.
Yeah, right. And he does go on to expand on that. And he says, I mean, they are doing both AR and VR in the same device, better singularly focused headset or better than singularly focused headsets in either category. I may not be an Apple fan, but credit where it's due. This is tantamount to iPhone launching compared to existing tech. So, little tip of the cap from Sean to Apple, which is rare and needs to be read and then put on the internet. We just need this as proof.
Just so that everyone knows that at one point he did actually approve of something Apple did. Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah. And then Drucker finishes off that conversation by saying, I mean, that's pretty cool. Glad they're finally producing new tech, not just changing the charger or removing the headphone jack and calling it innovation. And, an entirely new iPhone. So have to agree with you guys there. Now, Drucker still is not done, CP.
Ooh.
Um, he does jump in and he has another strong take here, which I got to get your opinion on this.
All right.
At Film Comp Podcast, I strongly disagree with that Big Kid D Man about the Little Mermaid. I do not think the lead had a strong enough voice to carry the film, and the only parts I truly enjoyed were the animated parts. I thought the rest was boring except for the side characters. Although the side characters absolutely crushed it. David Diggs and Aquafina were hilarious, and I loved Melissa as Ursula. I think she was enjoying the character, and it showed. I do agree the final battle wasn't enough. They should have given that more time. So, Drucker, two thumbs up from D-Man. I love your feedback, man. This is fantastic. I love opening Twitter and getting notifications and keeping these conversations going. And, I'm sorry you didn't necessarily enjoy The Little Mermaid maybe as much as I did, but I do appreciate your opinion on that. So good stuff. CP, any thoughts? I mean, I have a feeling that, again, here Anthony's agreeing with you. Now Drucker's agreeing with you. I don't know what's happening to me.
I'm just finally, getting lucky. That's all.
Yeah.
I mean,
So
Drucker sounds correct. I did not see The Little Mermaid. I still have no plans to see the live action Little Mermaid, but his criticisms are enough to prevent me from going to see it. So thank you, Drucker, for saving me $17. Always appreciated.
yeah, love the conversation, guys. Thank you so much. And then finally, CP, I just got to give a little tip of the cap to AMC for a cool snack experience through their app when we went to the movies. I actually really enjoyed it. My wife has the AMC Stubs or Premiere or A-List or whatever it is, and she ended up ordering all the snacks for us before we even left my apartment, and they were all ready and waiting for us when we got to AMC. It was pretty great.
Well, you give a shout out to AMC. I'll give my shout out to Steph. Thank you for taking care of us. That's always
Yeah,
appreciated.
also thank you to my wife. Yes, we do appreciate that. And it was pretty cool. Now I have to give a little wag of the finger to AMC as well, for not having any flash signage. They What was that about?
That was really weird. I'm like, we're going on the day that the movie is released, premiere day. You
We
would
wanted a
think that
photo.
you would have the giant displays, you
And I
know?
mean, they're showing the movie. I know the Flash, Ezra Miller can be somewhat controversial, and I could see maybe where AMC's like, "Oh, hey, we're not going to do that." But I feel like if you're showing the movie, you're already in. Just put the signage up.
Right. Especially
And
since they had
besides,
signage for everything else.
yeah, I was going to say they had signage everywhere. So, they had the big cardboard cutouts, they had posters, they had all of it. So it was just weird because it was like we were looking for a photo op to, for the movie we're actually going to see, and they didn't have anything. So, that just was a letdown. Now, CP, I'm gonna throw it over to you. Do you have any shout outs on this episode?
Just the city of Cleveland. D-Man, I hope you have plenty of fun time in Cleveland and go enjoy looking at both of their buildings. It should be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm here in Cleveland and then I'm going to Columbus. So, and for everybody that's just listening and you cannot see me right now, I am in a hotel room and there is a fan kind of coming and going. So, audio wise, you may hear just a little muffle in the background, but that's all it is. I don't think there's anything I can do about it.
Well, D-Man, that's all I got. As we told everybody, this week on the movie podcast, we are in fact going to be talking about movies. So I'm going to throw it over to you. Obviously, you went to see the movie that I have been most excited about the entire summer, Guardians of the Galaxy 3. What'd you think?
Well, first of all, James Gunn is amazing. He is a masterful storyteller and an even better person. So, I think he knocked this out of the park. No, James Gunn, that all is probably true. So I am being a little sarcastic and facetious here. But no, I thought Guardians 3 was actually a really good capper to the trilogy. So I thought they do most things really well. The movie's told fair it's got a very strong narrative core. I'm not gonna spoil it for everybody, but Rocket Raccoon kind of takes center stage here, and I'll leave it at that. But I think the movie does a really good job of wrapping up the story arcs in trilogy format for the Guardians. You know, and again, I can't dive too deep into that, but I thought the effects were pretty good. They had a couple really, really cool one-shot action sequences, similar to like an Avengers movie, which was cool. I like those, especially when they're able to, really highlight the unique powers of a team like the Guardians versus, I think sometimes we've seen some other, not necessarily Marvel, but in some other movies where like, guys are just punching other guys and you're kind of like, I don't know, it's all right. So I like the one shot. I thought those action sequences were really cool. The music was great. It's exactly what you would expect. They move, a decade ahead. I think they're in the 90s, 80s, 90s now. So there's some updated songs and then some throwbacks to some of the Guardians kind of classics now that are associated with that movie franchise. I thought the humor, it definitely gets some laughs. There's a couple good jokes in there. I thought some of the humor felt a little forced. Like it just didn't feel like the script was allowing them to kind of be free with the jokes. It felt like, they were reading a joke sometimes, but still funny. I think most of them have natural comedic charm and, they're able to do that fairly well. So it definitely pulls at the heartstrings in a couple of moments, which it's a bit of a roller coaster ride. You're going high, you're going low. I mean, it's pretty crazy. And yeah, overall, I mean, I think if I had to rank it out of all of the Guardians films, again, we're not going to get into spoilers on this one, but maybe we will for the Flash. I think we're going to have to.
Oh, we're
I'd
gonna have to
probably
get
say
spoilers.
I think Guardians 1 is still the best one. I think Guardians 3 is the second best one, and I think Guardians 2 is the third best one.
Okay.
So, and I
Okay.
actually enjoyed Guardians 2 because I know it got kind of a lot of flack. I think, some people were like it wasn't as strong as the original,
Oh, that was
but
me.
I liked it. So, CP, is there anything actually holding you back from seeing Guardians 3 other than just your hatred for this franchise and James Gunn? Which should be enough, but
No, that's pretty much it. So one question. I don't think this counts in the spoilers category. I do know, obviously, the cast and James Gunn have made it very clear that this is pretty much the end of the Guardians storyline. I do know
Mhm.
that at the end of the film, when the credit at the end of the credits, it does say Peter Quill will return. So, what are your
Yes.
thoughts on that? Is that a smart move by the MCU, or do you think it's either bring the whole gang back or none of them at all? What do you think about that?
So you are right. It is singular in the character that's described in that moment. It doesn't say the Guardians will return, which I think it does in previous iterations.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they've left the door open for him and probably the other actors who want to return for the team up movies. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? Like if you want to be a part of like Kang Dynasty and make a cameo or this and that. It didn't to me leave a lot of narrative room to be like, oh, we have all this more story that needs to be explored. I think whatever they would do with him next would kind of be a new arc.
Okay.
So that's why I was saying I think it's a really good capper for the trilogy. I think they do a really good job with the stories that they've been developing and the characters they've been developing. And whatever iteration of the Guardians that we get going forward and whoever shows up in whatever, cameo roles in team up movies or, the next film, it's gonna be new stories. That's how it feels to me. So if they have stories that are worthy of telling, then yeah, I think it's cool. I don't think there's any reason why you wouldn't, continue with some of these characters we love. It's just I don't know to what degree they're just going to force it for like trying to get a, you know, top build star in a movie.
Mm-hmm. No, that's understandable. That's
So,
understandable.
but yeah, I think on Twitter I gave my kind of 250 character limit review, and I gave Guardians about an 8 out of 10. I thought it was pretty good.
All right. I still am not going to see it, but if you haven't seen Guardians, tell us, let us know if D-Man just inspired you to go check it out or not. And if you have seen it, what did you think? We're always interested to
Yeah,
know.
kind of like Ivor and Drucker do. Anybody listening, if you guys have thoughts on the movie, be sure to share them. I'd love to hear what you guys thought. Ivor, I mean, I feel like we just need to meet up at this point, you know, and just have like that long, late night conversation about the state of the movies, comic book movies, but
Fair enough.
maybe. Yeah.
Definitely. I went to see a different movie, not Guardians of the Galaxy 3. I finally went and saw Transformers Rise of the Beasts.
Okay. So
Now,
now this is technically what number movie in the Transformers? Is
I
this like
believe
number
this is
eight,
the seventh movie.
seventh? But
Now,
first in a new trilogy, right? Or is it
see, they're kind of messing with you. First of all, I don't know about the rest of you, but obviously I'm a huge Transformers fan. And this is a franchise that I totally
so
jumped
you
jumped
like
off of.
Transformers,
I
but
love the
not
first one.
Guardians?
Yeah, that's what I just said. I love the first
Uh,
Transformers. Was very disappointed with the direction the franchise was going. Those first five were kind of hit or miss. I thought the first one was good. But then I went and saw the reboot that was Bumblebee, and I really loved the Bumblebee movie. I consider that the best Transformers movie made to date. For one, I like the idea of setting it in the 80s. That's when the Transformers were born. So, what a great idea of tying us back to that decade. It kind of permeates and it feels very much like one of those 80s coming of age movies. It's got a great 80s
okay.
soundtrack. But more importantly, unlike the rest of the Transformers movies, I think the story is succinct enough. They brought it small enough that it all works and it makes sense. But the CGI also looks really good, which is something that I've always complained about with the franchise. So going forward, this is technically a sequel to Bumblebee, which is technically a
Okay.
prequel to the other five Transformers movies, but it's technically also a reboot of everything because there's actual components of this story that contradict other facts brought forward in other Transformers movies. So my advice is, if you haven't watched a Transformers movie because you think they suck, well, you're probably not wrong, but I would say watch Bumblebee, watch Rise of the Beasts, and see if you're inspired to get back in.
Okay. So that's a good
What's
starting point.
What's great about this one is it's very much in line with the Beast Wars storyline from the 90s. Remember, that was the
Yeah.
CG Transformers show, and it was a lot of fun. It was a great show with great, some great characters. So it was fun to see them on the big screen. Following in the footsteps of Bumblebee, this one takes place in the 90s, so you would probably love it. There's a lot of great
Okay.
old school 90s hip hop that they play throughout the movie. My only real complaint of it was they'll play just portions of songs instead of the whole thing. But in terms of the CGI, it's not bad. It's not as good as the Bumblebee CGI, in my opinion,
Okay.
but it
I
was
know we
good.
talked, I think we did a segment where we had watched the trailers going into like
Mm-hmm.
2023.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was one of the things I had mentioned in just the trailer. We didn't know if the effects were done yet, but I was kind of skeptical. I was like, I don't know, the effects don't look amazing. They look all right. And you said I think they were a little bit better in the film than they were the trailer, though.
Yeah, it was better than in the trailer. Obviously, this movie kind of or it retreads ground that we've already been on within the Transformers universe in terms of certain people potentially dying, other people almost dying. These storylines aren't anything new, but if you like giant robots, then you'd probably really like it. And I think the bigger thing is it seems to be the only blockbuster that's come out so far this summer that kind of is exactly what audience are expecting it to be, for better or worse.
I think Guardians 3 might be that movie, but I don't know. I saw that one, you saw this one, so maybe we'll have to switch it up and go check it out. Who is the lead? Because I mean, it's not Shia LaBeouf anymore.
No,
So it's been like him, it's been some girl, it's been Mark Wahlberg, I think, at one point. I
they've
mean,
kind of changed it
who's leading these movies
around
though?
in every movie. Sort of post the original trilogy, they've kind of always swapped out who the lead character is.
Was there a
So
Megan Fox cameo?
no, it's not in any way linked to the original trilogy, but there
Oh
is
yeah,
a
you said it takes place in the
killer.
90s.
There
Yeah,
is
yeah.
a
Okay.
killer spoiler at the end, which I kind of want to tell everybody. I'm just
Well, you
going
could
to
just
tell
say
everybody.
spoiler. Yeah, you could.
Post credit scene, it actually links the Transformers with the GI Joe. So
No.
I think that's pretty cool. Apparently, Hasbro and Paramount have
Go
a
Joe.
plan now to build a new franchise, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So I'm really curious to see what they're going to do moving forward.
Wow, that is quite a spoiler because that, hey, almost sets up a whole new shared universe now
Yep.
with what kind of team up movie or what are they going to do?
Yep.
That's that's
So
pretty wild.
could be incredible. I'm really excited to see what's going to happen there.
Okay. Well, that's cool. I mean, all right, if you so obviously I think you made it sound like where you would probably stack it up in the Transformers lineage, probably at like 3 or 4.
I'd put this as the third best Transformers movie.
And what would you give it out of 10?
Solid 7 out of 10, 6 or 7 out of
Okay.
10. You're not
Cool,
going to leave
cool.
the theater disappointed. It's a popcorn movie. You're going to get your money's worth. You're going to have a good time.
Well, I like the way you set it up because you've kind of inspired me to go check out Bumblebee and then now this one and kind of maybe get back into it because I actually am that demographic that I really love the first one. I thought it was so much fun and they did so many things right. And then as that series went on, I found it, I don't want to say it was unwatchable, but like I could not even sit there and watch it without like being like, wow.
Well, the CGA got worse and worse. The plots got more and more convoluted, and it really was becoming unwatchable.
Yeah, like
So,
they lost me along the way. So I know that was a franchise that I haven't really, gotten back into. And I don't know, maybe it's time. Maybe it's time.
well, speaking of unwatchable franchises, I think we got to get into it.
All right. Now we got to preface this movie just came out, I think, with the first two, even though we didn't get into major spoilers. those movies have been out for a little bit, and you can, still go check them out. But the Flash just dropped, and we are going to talk about it, CP. We are going to drop spoilers. It's got to happen. It's
Whoa.
the only way. We said before we hit record, we're like, this is the only way you can talk about it. You
Absolutely. There's a lot to be said about this one. So unfortunately, if you're planning to see it and you don't want the spoilers and you haven't been on the internet, then just, pause the podcast, pick it up in 3 hours after you go see the movie, and then you can participate in the conversation with us.
All right, so let's get into the Flash. I mean, what do you think worked here? Is it
Well,
a great conclusion? Yeah.
first of all, let's
what do
do
you think?
this. So Ivor was awesome enough to send us his review of the movie. So I want to read that to cue up Ivor's thoughts. Then I'm going to read a celebrity's tweet about the movie, and then we'll really get into it. So this
Okay,
is what
sounds
Ivor
good.
said. The Flash was strong, but it wasn't great for me. I loved anything and everything to do with Batman, loved Supergirl. I love seeing what spoiler was. We'll come back to that one. Could have been like. There was just too much Ezra Miller for me. I felt the CGI was unfinished. The X-Men Quicksilver slow time scenes were much better done. So that is what a faithful listener to our show thinks. And I think it's a pretty
Thank
good
you,
review.
Ivor.
Now, Stephen King tweeted about his experience of going to see The Flash at a special preview screening of the film.
Okay.
This is Stephen King, respected writer, respected screenwriter. Let's get his thoughts. I got an advanced screening of The Flash today. As a rule, I don't care a lot for superhero movies, but this one is special. It's heartfelt, funny, and eye-popping. I loved it.
Wow.
And James Gunn verified this by saying that this wasn't, he said, in fact, hell yeah, it is an actual tweet from Stephen King.
All right. I mean, that is quite an endorsement. I know you and I have our thoughts because I don't think anybody's going to argue that like The Flash is a perfect movie. Uh it has its flaws, but I mean, I'll just give my 2 cents right now. I enjoyed it. I mean, I think it was a movie that definitely paid out in cameos and, kind of plot references and stuff to the larger Snyderverse. And it kind of rewards some of the people that did hang around. I don't think tonally it matches what Zack Snyder was actually doing. This movie it's a much lighter tone. Like Ivor said, there maybe is a little bit too much Ezra Miller. Like literally, there's two of them. But
Yeah.
like he has kind of a grating tone when he talks. He's often eating. I mean, I could see where he would be kind of annoying. I think at one point it gets annoyed with himself in story. Like
Yeah,
he
he's
gets
kind of like a
annoyed with.
giant man child who talks a lot, and you're almost like, bro, you need to chill out for a sec.
And can we just acknowledge that, like, with all the controversy surrounding Ezra Miller, they went ahead and left a joke in there where he's talking to another version of himself and he's like annoyed with this person and he's like, should I drug him? And I was like, damn, they really left that joke in there. Like, I would have probably bounced that one because how's he going to say that and not, anybody in the audience not think about that?
Right? That's
I did.
not exactly a smart move. So I actually feel the opposite of D-Man. I actually was not happy with the Flash movie. And that's really
Wow.
weird because that is my demographic, or I am their demographic. I mean, I own a Flash shirt. I own multiple Flash shirts. I should have been there. I should have seen it 3 times now since it was released. And I was really disappointed. And if you've seen the internet, if you saw our own posts, I think the first reason for disappointment really is the fact that the CGI in this movie is just so unacceptable for the standards that we have now for major superhero films.
Yeah, and we had thoughts about this, CP, because I know right after the movie released and the CGI was getting kind of bashed on Twitter and online, the director did come out and give an interview where he was like, "Hey, some of this was like intentional. I think providing cover for the VFX artists and the movie itself so that the conversation doesn't just get consumed with how bad the effects are." And it sounded like he was just trying to provide some cover, but it essentially what he was getting at was that he was saying that when Barry's in his kind of like time warp mode, things
Oh,
kind
the
of
Speed
look
Force.
cartoonish. Yeah. And he was saying they look cartoonish, you know, that but this is being done intentionally because it's being warped. His perception is being warped. And I don't know that anybody truly bought that from the director. I mean, at the end of the day, you just look at it and you're like, it just doesn't look good. Like even so, I mean, you're saying you intentionally made a bad looking movie? Like, you know,
Yeah. On
if
top of it, there was this insistence from the director to apply a CGI overlay over the characters' costumes. And to me, it added a blurry, fuzzy quality where nothing looked really sharp. They did it to Batman, they did it to Supergirl, they did it to Zod, and of course, they did it to the Flash. And I think we hadn't seen that done in other DC Universe films. And I think it was really a mistake because just watching the action on the screen, something didn't feel right.
felt a little bit like a video game cutaway, if I'm being honest. Like, we know it's CG, but it doesn't even look like it's,
Trying.
I mean, well, yeah, you're like, it's a video game, right? Like, it doesn't need to look real. It's like, that's kind of what the
Yeah.
vibe was. And part of me thinks that the reason for this is I'm sure there's just some high up exec at, Warner Brothers that's like, hey, we're not doing any more sequels. Maybe it was James Gunn. I don't know.
It had
But
to have been James Gunn. He's the guy
yeah,
calling the shots.
I'm guessing somebody up there was like, how much is it going to cost to fix the CG? Like, what is it going to cost us? And they're probably like, it's X amount. And he's like, no, don't do it. Like, don't spend the money on that and just, it'll be fine. And I don't know. I do think it was distracting. That definitely you don't ever want that. You hear that a lot from special effects artists that like they know they're doing their job well when attention isn't necessarily being drawn. It's like you're just
Yeah,
immersed in the story.
absolutely.
And this was definitely something where I could see where, yeah, it can definitely pull you out of the story because it almost comes off so cartoonish at times that it's like, you know, how can you not see it? So I think the effects, that was definitely something that stood out that maybe wasn't up to par. But I don't know if there's any way other than just simply money and more time being invested in this movie. And we already looked up, the production budget, and it was already like $200 million. Like they've spent a
Mhm.
lot of money. There's a lot of controversy surrounding Ezra Miller and this whole Snyderverse as a whole. So I think they just weren't willing to invest what it probably would take to bring that CG up to a, acceptable level. But I thought there were other things that worked. I think Stephen King mentions that the movie did have heart. I mean, I think there is a sense of what it means to be able to time travel and change the past. And they are telling a somewhat endearing story here about Barry going back in time to save his mom.
Mhm.
And that definitely at times pulls at the heartstrings and you feel for the character. So, I mean, I thought on a story level, that kind of worked as a mechanism for time travel and the multiverse and all that. My problem with that aspect of the film was that a few of the scenes felt like retreads from, Spider-Man No Way Home, maybe into the Spider-Verse and maybe
Yeah.
even Avengers Endgame. It felt like
Yeah.
we've seen some of this already now. And it almost some of the scenes, I was like, I mean, at the end of the movie, he has a chance to talk to his mom, and it plays a lot like when Thor talks to his mom
Yeah.
you know, even though Thor and his mom, there's a different dynamic of who knows what in that scene versus this one, it plays the same though, because they both know their mom's going to die.
Yeah.
So it has that same sort of element to it. I think Michael Keaton, as great as he is in the role of Batman, I mean, that played very much like Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield coming back in Spider-Man No Way Home. It
Yeah.
felt that way. And they're doing that and it is fun. It's the Batman version of that, but where when they did it in No Way Home, it was like incredibly refreshed. Like everybody cheered, and I think people cheered a little bit when Keaton came and we got the Batman music and all that. It was
Mhm.
awesome.
Mhm.
But yeah, it didn't have the novelty effect that No Way Home had when they did it because it just has been done, and it's been done recently. So I think that story wise, I think the heart of the movie actually does sort of work. But when you get into all this multiverse time travel, I don't think that really worked as well as because it's just they're not doing anything new with it. It just felt like what we've seen before.
No, I would
So
agree. I think one of the problems I had, and we'll share some of the spoilers now. We just want to give you plenty of time. There's a lot of cameos. They really try and tie this into what's existing in what's been out there from DC. The problem that I have is it feels removed. They're not actually trying to integrate the other DC films into this movie as a cohesive universe. In the film, Barry Allen will be running and he'll see Christopher Reeve's Superman.
mhm.
He'll see Henry Cavill's Superman, but there's no actual integration with these characters and these films, which within the era of digital technology, we could have made him run into a universe and appear in the original Superman movie or in the middle of Superman versus Zod from Superman 2. And then kind of so as a viewer, we would actually see Barry Allen actually blending all these existing DC films going back to the 70s, even beyond, right? We see clips of the original Superman television show. And that's pretty cool, but it just feels like a nice little nod. They didn't actually integrate it into the story as I wish they would have.
I will say, like, I do like that they were able to bring in cameos and characters from the Snyderverse, actually quite a few of them. And I did also enjoy Michael Keaton as Batman because he takes on a full supporting character in this story.
Yep.
And I liked where he was at too. I liked how they did everything with him. I thought Michael Keaton still has it, and I thought as Batman, that Batman costume not just amazing.
It was great. Everything, seeing that costume again, listening to him say, I'm Batman, getting the old, the 89 Batman music, it felt so right. I loved it.
Yeah, they brought
I mean,
back
it's
a lot of the
sad that the best
iconography.
part of the Flash movie is Batman.
Yeah, and there is a little bit of overshadowing by Batman. But as far as the other cameos go, like I actually really enjoyed the cameos, particularly the Snyderverse ones. I thought were cool. It made it feel like Barry Allen was still very much a part of that shared world.
Mm-hmm.
And particularly at the beginning of the movie, they do a good job of making it feel like, hey, this is still the Snyderverse. Like, this
With
isn't just like some
Snyderverse,
solo
yeah, characters.
Flash
Yeah.
film. Like those characters are still out there. He's still working with Batman to fight crime. And I think he's communicating with Alfred, and they bring a lot of people. I wanted to ask you though, as far as cameos go. So I think the most controversial one was Christopher Reeves, which obviously he's not in the film, and I'm assuming his family gave the okay to use either old footage or a digitally altered version of him to make an
Mm-hmm.
appearance. So I don't know that there's any controversy, particularly around the idea of him showing up from a rights perspective. But a lot of people were talking about the fact that if you know anything about Christopher Reeve's story and his inability to walk, he was an advocate for not being shown walking or standing, to bring recognition to his condition and what had
Mm-hmm.
happened to him. And a
Yeah.
lot of people felt that that might have violated his wishes, although we'll never know,
Yeah.
right? I mean, what can you do?
Yeah.
But I think they were trying to, you know, honor him and pay homage and say like, hey, you're a part of all this still. And that's, it's about the best you can do, like you said, without kind of taking the character of the Flash and reintegrating him into old footage.
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean, you just can't do anything more than that. I think if you go with like a digital recreation and literally like integrating him as a supporting character, you probably would run into some trouble because they basically just have him standing there, a nod.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't know, I didn't find it to be distasteful per se. Like, I thought they were trying to do something right by him and his place in the DC universe. But yeah, some people got very offended. I didn't know. Is that something that stood out to you when they did it?
I
Like, was it,
I'm
do you think it was done just for like that cheap moment?
I don't think so. I think it was supposed to be a nice nod to the fact that, I mean, many people still consider him to be the very best Superman we've ever seen. Obviously, he had such an influential role in really even bringing the Superman superhero genre to the big screen. I thought it was a nice tribute.
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and go here on the side of positivity and just kind of agree that I think the intentions were in the right place. I don't think it was done just so for some, you know, cheap cameo so that, oh, they drum up interest in the movie. I think they were really trying to say, like, hey, we're celebrating the cinematic universe here that is all the DC movies, and he was a part of it. And it'd
Now,
feel weird if we couldn't acknowledge him.
absolutely. While we're talking cameos, there was one cameo that I think was really spectacular, and that is a reference to the unmade film Superman Lives. Which, if you don't know the story of Superman Lives, there's a great documentary. It's called The Death of Superman Lives. Superman Lives was a Superman movie slated to be produced in the 90s, directed by Tim Burton, written by Kevin Smith, and it was going to bring about Nicolas Cage as Superman. And the internet is divided over whether this movie would have been the greatest superhero movie of all time or the greatest disaster in the history of superheroes. But I, for one, was really excited to finally get to see Nicolas Cage as Superman.
Hey, he was
Even
suited
though it
up.
was
I
for
mean,
a moment or two, I thought that was great.
yeah, like again, it's fun. It's paying homage to the history of, the legacy of what even could have been, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like there, it's
Mm-hmm.
not always what we got. Sometimes there's, legends out there. And that was one of them. And again, I thought it was fun. I got the vibe that they just weren't doing this for, oh, like let's just see. I'm like, no, I think they're trying to pay
Tribute and homage
tribute
to the
to,
people that did it.
yeah, to all the things that have come before. And so I just didn't find it to be as distasteful as I think some others did.
Now, my disappointment from the cameo front comes from two things. For one, there was a failure to bring Grant Gustin, TV's Arrowverse version of The Flash, into the film, which I
Of
thought would have
which
been
has Ezra Miller appeared on that show?
he actually has in the
Yeah.
Crisis on Infinite Earths. So it would have been great to kind of flip the other end of that coin, which is Grant Gustin as the Flash finally appearing in an Ezra Miller film. But it also would have been a nice tribute. The Flash television series just ended this year after like 11 seasons. And what a way to send off that character than to give him this moment in the Flash film. And if you're going to combine all these things, why not combine the television Arrowverse that DC and Warner Brothers created, which was actually really successful and loved by fans? I thought that would have been a nice nod.
Yeah, I have to agree with you there. I think it's not necessarily that there weren't enough cameos. There's probably too many already. So I understand if you're like, hey, narratively, like we need to make a decision. But you're telling me in this movie that runs almost like 2 hours and 20 minutes, you couldn't find one other shot of that guy?
Yep.
Like now, personally, I think he's a character that you actually do bring in a supporting role. I mean, ironically, they actually have Barry talking to another version of himself. I mean, it could have been him.
Yeah, right. When what a way to really, ramp this up and be much more creative. Now, the other big thing I have is this, and the only person we can blame is James Gunn himself. Have you heard? I'm debating about whether to spoil the final scene in the movie or not.
Yeah, do it.
Let's do it. So at
Yeah,
the end
just
of the
do it.
movie, Barry Allen comes out of the courtroom, setting his father free, proving that he's innocent. Bruce Wayne calls him up on the phone. He gets out of the car to congratulate Barry, and it's George Clooney Batman.
He's back. Not bat nipples and all, though. He was playing Bruce Wayne at this point, not Batman.
He's more like just
So,
George Clooney. But what I find disappointing
yeah.
is what was originally supposed to be in that
Oh, I
scene.
don't even know what that is. So, what
Oh,
is it?
I do. I did some digging on the internet. It was actually supposed to be Supergirl, Kara Zor-El,
Okay.
Superman, Henry Cavill, Wonder Woman, played by Gal
Okay.
Gadot, Aquaman, played by Jason Momoa, were all supposed to appear along with the new Batman, Michael Keaton. And I
Okay.
actually think that would have been an awesome scene to end the movie on, because I would have fist bumped in the theater and been like, I forgive you for all your bad CGI because this is freaking awesome.
Now, do you think the reasoning behind why that didn't happen is just they hit the Snyderverse with the axe and they're like, we're not doing it?
Exactly. I mean, they actually actively cut the Cavill Superman scenes from the movie. You know, they made it very clear they have no interest in pursuing this. James Gunn pretty much told us this months ago when he launched his new DC master plan that included no plans for a Flash movie. Even though apparently there was actually a script written for a Flash 2 sequel to this. And
Really?
I think between the decision to remove some of those cameos, the decision to not spend the money where it needed to be spent on the CGI, I think it's very clear that DC had no interest in actually turning this into a blockbuster, which I
Yeah,
think
and
it
I
could have
think
been.
too, I think you do make a really good point, which is narratively, the all the story mechanisms were in place for essentially the Justice League to arrive outside the courtroom at the end of the movie. And whoever was just going to play those characters going forward, you literally get alternate versions of those characters. So, like, if Ben Affleck is out, well, we have different variations of Batman. And even if you want to recast and go with someone new, I mean, it could have been Pattinson, it could have been anybody. Like
Mm-hmm.
you can get your new version, right? And I think, obviously Flashpoint, everybody kind of saw this as like the kind of soft reboot for the Snyderverse, where it was like, hey, how is this all going to like move forward and move forward in a way that, accommodates the fact that some of these actors aren't going to be coming back. But if you wanted to recast Wonder Woman, if you wanted to recast Superman, you could have done it right there. Now, granted, you wouldn't get the fist bump you would get if you brought back those actors. That would have been really cool. But I could see where originally the idea behind doing the Flashpoint movie was that, hey, we can get like a little soft reboot here and
Well,
go
it,
forward with whatever plan we want to do.
and we've talked about this on the podcast. I think the real crime with this is DC should have been locked down on their plans going forward with the future of the DCU and the DCEU and what they were doing. It should have been go check out Shazam, go check out The Flash, because part of the reason I think these movies have bombed, I mean, as of now, The Flash has made about $55 million in the United States against a
Not great.
$220 budget. The
20
problem
million.
is, by essentially telling us that these films don't matter in the long term, there's no desire to see them. And I'm willing to bet we're going to find out that Blue Beetle is a failure and Aquaman 2 is a failure, because who wants to go see movies when they don't really matter in the grand scheme of DC Comics? The characters aren't likely going to be around. It's kind of a turnoff.
Yeah, I have to agree. I think they definitely, had a chance here with all these other movies in play. Like you said, Blue Beetle, Shazam 2, Aquaman 2, and Flashpoint being an opportunity to actually kind of reset some of this stuff. I don't know. I think it's a bit of a missed opportunity. They just want to close the door on it, it sounds like, and move on.
So my
And
question to you is this: do
mhm.
you think that the failure of this movie, because there's plenty of articles pointing to the fact that this is about superhero fatigue for movie audiences, do you think that this is because of superhero fatigue, or do you think that the failure of this movie is a basis of the other stuff we mentioned? What's your opinion? Why is this
Ah,
movie going to be a bomb?
I don't think there's actually superhero movie fatigue, although we are getting more superhero movies now than ever. So that might be a slight factor.
And just
I
earlier
think,
today, Marvel announced changing their slate of future films, consciously aware that something's not working. So you don't think there's superhero fatigue though?
I think maybe from the studio side, which is, I think so like, here's the two things. Like, if you go back and look at like the MCU phase one, I mean, those are not like comic book movie masterpieces, right? I mean, Iron Man's great, but like they're solid comic book films, but they're by no means like these masterpieces that are held in high regard. I think that's just where the comic book movie bar was at the time. And over time, particularly the MCU, but some DC films, they've raised that bar. And so now the expectations of audiences when they go to watch a superhero film or a comic book movie, they're just higher. You know, they want to be entertained. They want that popcorn action and entertainment and those fist pumping moments, but they also want some substance because we've experienced movies that have it and they've, really brought out our emotions. So I think one is just they've just raised the bar in their own pursuit, which is in some ways a good problem to have. But the other thing too is it may be studio fatigue and not necessarily audience fatigue, because I think if the movies themselves were still uh hitting those high levels, we would go. I think right now a perfect example of that is Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. It's getting a lot of praise. It's very popular. Obviously it's tracking similar to Into the Spider-Verse because it's an animated film and not live
Mhm.
action, but I think the appetite is still there for those movies. The other thing too, though, is when it comes to that studio fatigue, the reason they're not hitting those high levels is because you look at Marvel's slate, they just have so many projects that it's diluting the timeline and muddying, right? Phase four, people were kind of like, what's going on here? The movies don't naturally lead into one another. And I think, we talked about effects even during the Flash, but this has come up in, Marvel films, Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness and Ant-Man, Quantum Mania, or Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantum Mania. Like, I think the studio is spread maybe too thin as well, which is like you said, Marvel is reducing its slate because they might be realizing that it's like, it's not necessarily fatigue that we wouldn't want to go. It's that they're no longer able to produce
The quality
movies
that they
at
used
that
to.
top tier quality that we expect now.
Yeah.
And so when that happens, right, and our expectations are either not being met or at best being met but not exceeded, uh yeah, I think, people just naturally are a little bit let down. You start to care a little less. And, that's a problem maybe from their own success. But I think if the movies are good, people will go. I don't think people are saying they don't want to go to the movies. So if you can just, continue to raise the bar and hit those high levels, I think people will go. But who knows? Maybe that actually what I just described is superhero fatigue. you know?
Maybe. I guess we'll
I mean,
never
what are your
know.
thoughts?
Well, I think there's a fatigue of bad superhero movies. I think if Christopher Nolan makes another Batman movie, we're all going to be butts in the seats to see it.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. I think,
And I think, they point to the failure of DC with the Flash, right? Oh, no. But when you look at the history of the DCEU, it has been a disaster. The first film in it, a Superman movie produced by Christopher Nolan, directed by Zack Snyder, well received, but in no way was intended to be a building block of a cinematic universe. All of a
yeah,
sudden, DC interjects, forces them to change course halfway through. They start popping up other films, which is fine. The creme de la creme of the franchise is supposed to be a Justice League movie that is completely recut, re-edited, reshot by a second director. And then I think the problem is DC just plays catch up. And what we're
yeah,
seeing out of this Flash movie is it feels like something that we all saw 2 years ago when Into the Spider-Verse came out.
yeah,
And that's not what we were looking for. We were hoping to get something original. The CGI effects look like they're from 2004. And those things alone are pointing to, in my mind, a bad movie, not necessarily a fatigue of superhero movies. Like you said, if the studios were producing films at the qualities that we knew they were capable of, I think a lot more people would be excited to see this movie. Case in point, I mean, there is one sequence in the Flash movie that is a true Flash sequence, taking advantage of the character who the Flash is, right? And it's the beginning when he saves a bunch of babies in a hospital, and it's fine. But the problem is, we have seen similar sequences in three other movies that are all superior. One is when the Flash saves Iris West in
yeah,
Zack Snyder's Justice League. Two is when Sonic is in the bar fight in the first Sonic movie. And the best of them all, the first of them, is the Quicksilver scene that Ivor referenced in his message from X-Men Days of Future Past, where we see someone say, look at the cool things we can do with these speedster characters and their superpowers. And let's do it, and let's do it really well.
Yeah, and I mean, at least in Days of Future Past, I know that scene was incredibly well regarded by, kind of being a signature action moment, which is ironic given its speed.
Mm-hmm.
But from Days of Future Past, and I mean, a lot of people thought it was very creative at the time. It was this kind of new take where I think up to that point, when we had speedsters, we always showed them, literally like flashing,
Yeah.
and then they kind of they invert that and they take us into like what it would look like. Well, what does it look like if you're that fast guy? Like, and then all of a sudden you're
Mm-hmm.
like, wow, I've never seen that. And it all has to do with motion. And that's why it's important that it be on, because, right, you can't capture that scene in an actual comic book frame. You can kind of do the actual speed thing by just an you know, note of light, but
Mm-hmm.
you can't slow it down. So it
Yeah.
felt very cinematic. It felt like very much a creative way to take a look at this character we've all seen before and do it in a new way. And
Exactly.
like you said, the problem here is now this feels like a retread. Like it's just their own take on that same scene. We're like, it's not really bringing a lot new to the table, although it was fun. I
Mm-hmm.
actually really liked that sequence. I thought it was good.
Yeah.
So I like the dog.
Well, D-Man always loves dogs. So that's the Flash in a nutshell. I look, if that excites you, go see it. If that frustrates you, go see it. And we would love to talk to you about what they could have done better. Because I think my frustration is walking out of that movie, I just saw wasted potential from DC, which is something I've become very accustomed to over the last few years as a hardcore DC Comics fan.
Well, you should be excited because it sounds like James Gunn has a master plan. So should be good to go going forward, right? They got it all figured out. So anyway, I did enjoy The Flash. So like if I'm gonna give a rating, I'm probably gonna give it probably about a 6, at best a 7, but probably about a 6. I thought it was actually a really good popcorn film. It had some pretty cool action sequences. Michael Keaton as Batman was a lot of fun to see on screen again. I mean, that's honestly probably the biggest draw that this movie even has going for it. If Michael Keaton wasn't in it, I don't even know how much people would want to go. You know, he's a
Yeah.
big reason it's successful. I did want to ask you, Michael Shannon is as Zod. Was he really in this movie, or was that just old recycled footage of him?
No, it actually was. And I have to give mad props to
Wait,
Michael
what?
Shannon.
He
It was
came
actually
back?
Michael Shannon came back because
Okay,
he
because
made sure to ask Zack Snyder if it was okay if he went back because he's like, I don't know if this is undoing the work we already
he did
did.
get
Are you cool
billing
with it?
in
Yeah.
the at
Yeah.
the end. He was
He
billed, so I
he
figured
came
he
back.
did.
He actually was on set. I think the reason why while you were wondering if it was him was because of that CGI overlay that we talked about. It didn't look right. It didn't look sharp. That's why it gives the impression that it could have just been Zod taken from Man of Steel and CGI'd mouth movements or something.
Yeah, I mean, what did you think about like Batman getting to see the '89 Batmobile, the Batwing? They even did a couple nods to the weight line from that movie. They did the moon. They did, I don't know, they did a couple things to really kind of highlight that. You like Batman?
I mean, Keaton Batman is amazing. And as I said earlier, I think it's a shame that the best part of the Flash movie is Batman.
What'd you think about I guess is it Supergirl?
Yeah.
I mean, do you think that they just did that because they're like Henry Cavill's out? Like, or
I would love to know more. I mean, the storyline could have easily been done that was all supposed to be a Henry Cavill's
Superman?
character, Superman.
Yeah.
I think the weird part was typically when we see Kara Zor-El, she has blonde hair. So I thought the decision to give her brown hair, I was wondering if that was more to do with the fact that in some way this was a replacement for Henry Cavill's Superman than its own Supergirl character. So I don't know. I guess we'll find out as more information comes out about what really went on behind the scenes. Because I am exciting. At some point, 10 years down the line, someone will spill the beans and give the whole truth about what really happened behind the scenes with this movie, and it's going to be juicy good. I heard one thing. Apparently, it was originally supposed to be rated R because there
Oh,
was such
wow.
violent fight sequences, and to get the PG-13 rating, they had to cut out big chunks of the movie. So it will be interesting to find out what's really going on with this one as more time passes.
I have one more thing that I wanted to bring up with you, CP, and I want to get your take on this. It's a story element, and again, this is going to spoil the end of the movie. But how did you feel about at the end, essentially him just kind of being like, "I have to like let my mom die." Like, as far as introducing time travel, like there's a lesson in there that like you can't go back and change time, right? I think Bruce Wayne has a line at the beginning of the movie, Ben Affleck saying something about like those scars are what make us who we are. We're not meant to go change the past. But there was something, I guess, I don't want to call it self-defeating, but to like go through all this only to end up back in the exact same place where you're like, oh, I just got to let what happens happens. You're
I think
like,
my
I don't know, you were
problem
told that right at the
I
time.
think my problem was it doesn't feel like Barry truly comes to that realization himself. He watches the actions of his counterpart, the other Barry Allen, and that's what leads him to this decision. We don't see a movie where Barry Allen is in the butterfly effect, right? And as he tweaks one thing, he finds out something else happens, right? He
Hmm.
watches that. And I think that that's why it feels self-defeating, because it feels like, as you said, the character is warned of this. He watches it happen to other people, but he doesn't actually experience this growth and come to the realization that there's nothing he can do, that he can go back in time as many times as he wants, and all he's going to do is create new offshoots of the same timeline with new implications, but he'll never be able to go back and save his mom. And I think that that
Well,
is why it
and
feels
I don't know.
unsettling.
I think there's something that's just inherently like, I know we're talking about time travel paradoxes here and like all of that, but like the idea that you can literally go back in time and offshoot as many multiverses, but you can't save your mom, like that's the rule, seems like, I don't know, a little ridiculous to me, right? Like, so that's where we draw the line is like, you can literally do almost infinitely anything, but not that.
Yeah,
Like,
right.
I don't know. It sounds stupid. Like,
I mean, that's a good point. And I think Batman has some line where he talks about vectors or whatever. But
yeah, he's like
I
a
mean,
cross points or
yeah,
something.
but you bring up a good point. You're like, I mean, pretty sure there's a way to figure it out.
Yeah, like I feel like if like I don't know, and then only to just arrive there. I just felt like the ending, like you said, it needed some sort of a like emotional crux moment where I think, another good example is just a different movie that's doing something similar, which is, Peter Parker has to give up his identity. He
Mhm.
had to sacrifice everything, you know, and it hits you in the heart because you're like, oh, damn, like that would be hard. Like your friends don't, no one knows you. He had to sacrifice something. And it's weird because the sacrifice they're implying here is that Barry loses his mom, but he always lost his mom.
He already lost her. It's not a new sacrifice. He's not
Right. Like
sacrificing. Yeah.
it's just letting what happens happens. So it's, I don't know, it's just like jarring to me. I like by the end of it, yeah, like he gets out and he got most of the things he wanted, which is fine. You don't always have to end up, losing everything for a story to be worthy, but it just felt like, I don't know, she always died. Like it would have been crazy, like, I don't know, if he lost his dad too or something. I don't know.
Hmm.
Or his identity or so, I just if I don't know.
There's no
Just my two
sacrifice.
cents.
There's no true sacrifice when you're just giving up something you already lost.
Well, yeah, but like you said, the point is though that he was already told and warned about this, and then he's watching it as it's like happening to his counterpoint. But it wasn't, I don't think it was narratively strong enough. Obviously the scene where he talks to his mom pulls at your heartstrings. I think that works because there's just such a strong emotional connection between a mom and a son.
Mhm.
So I don't think that scene doesn't play right. It's kind of like, why did we go through all this?
I think that's a good point. I think that's a
So
very good point. Well, that's it. We saw the Flash. That's our thoughts. Let us know.
what would you rate it out of 10? I mean, like I said, I'd probably give it a solid 6, maybe a 7. I actually did enjoy myself as far as a popcorn movie goes. As far as seeing Keaton again, I thought the movie was fun. Some of the scenes had heart. I don't agree with Stephen King, but I did like it. Like I
I
enjoyed
give
the
it.
movie. And I think
I
if you're a fan of the Snyderverse and the DCEU, how can you not like it?
well, as a fan of the Snyderverse and the DCEU, I was very disappointed. I give it a 5.
Okay. I mean, we're not far off from each other per se. I think I'm just taking a more optimistic
Optimistic.
outlook on it. Yeah. I think, like you said, I don't even know. I think you're just so crushed by what could have been that.
That could be. I actually told my brother I'd go see it with him this week. So maybe watching it again, I'll get a renewed opinion of things. But
All right. Well, we'll throw it out to our listeners now. Ivor, thank you so much for your review. Drucker, we love hearing from you about the movies and the different topics. But to everybody, to all of our listeners, thank you guys for tuning in and be sure to continue the conversations. Any of the social media platforms, leave us a comment, tweet at us, whatever it is. We love to hear from you guys. I mean, literally, like I said, I get excited opening the app, hoping that somebody's uh, going to be talking about some of these things. So it's a lot of fun. And we love talking about it here on the show too. And CP and I have had some pre-production meetings about potentially getting some people on as guests. So we're going to try to work that in probably end of summer. So we're working on it.
we are
But
working on it.
yeah, you can follow the show at filmmakerscompass.com, where we have a feed of all the episodes as well as links to all of our social media, which is at Film Comp Podcast on almost every platform. So you can search Filmmakers Compass. You can follow me at Big Kid D-Man and CP.
You can follow me at NDCal5. Thanks for hanging out and talking, well, especially new releases on this week episode of Filmmakers Compass Podcast. You can find us back here next week. Until then, keep watching movies.
See you guys from Ohio.